Hello everyone, it is Amateur Meteorologist First One over here. It is July 21st, 2020, and it's a hot one for many of you guys, especially in terms of anomalies for the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. We have a persistent high off the coast in the Mid-Atlantic region, which is really pumping in those warm southerly winds, and that's keeping things quite toasty. And as you can see from the satellite view, that heat and that really unstable that heat is really causing the atmosphere to destabilize, and you have a bunch of storms just firing up, even some mesoscale convective systems here down in the deep south with some pulse storms forming in Virginia. And then if you go to the northwest, you have a more organized area of instability with a more organized line of storms forming all the way from Wisconsin to northern Texas. And then to the west, things remain relatively quiet. You do have a few thunderstorms in Colorado and New Mexico, but things are relatively dry west of the Mississippi. Now, if we switch to the National Weather Service all hazards map, we can see that a large portion of the Mid-Atlantic is under a large area of heat advisories and even excessive heat warnings in central North Carolina. And that's because these areas with excessive heat warnings are having slightly higher dew points, causing the heat indices to be in the 110 to 115 zone, while the rest of the areas in heat advisories are seeing heat indices from 105 to 110-ish. Now, this is the NOAA severe weather risk outlook, and you can see that pretty good areas are under a marginal risk with pockets for slight risks for severe weather. And if we go to day 2, we can see that this severe risk continues and moves slightly east, with that slight risk being basically north of I-64 all the way up until the middle portions of New York. And the main risk with these storms, due to the large amounts of heat and daytime heating that really sort of serves to destabilize the atmosphere, the main risks are going to be persistent downdrafts and some very strong localized winds, and even some possible hail because of the magnitude of the heating and the potential strength of the updrafts with these storms. Now, if we go to the NAM model, we can see that this is valid for 0Z Wednesday, July 22nd. And as you can see, that the NAM does depict more storms actually for the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, and eventually these storms do actually stay pretty confined, basically south of the New England states, and basically stay from Ohio, Pennsylvania, and southwards. And if we look at the soundings for the NAM model, especially in the Virginia and Mid-Atlantic area, we can see that if we go at 23Z, valid Tuesday, July 21st, or let me go to Wednesday, valid around, 23Z, Wednesday, July 22nd, you click on the sounding right here, you can see that the sounding is pretty impressive. You do have this gradual increase of instability here, and this 92 right here is caused by that strong daytime heating, allowing for that parcel to rise quite quickly, and then you have all this energy right here that can be tapped in. And look at that. The cloud heights are going to be 150 millibars in height, which is pretty high, really indicating that these updrafts will be strong and that the parcels will be quite buoyant as they go into the atmosphere. You can see that's indicated by the CAPE, which is in the 2,000 to 3,000 range according to the NAM model. So that slight risk by the National Weather Service is justified for tomorrow, stretching anywhere from Virginia all the way to Pennsylvania. I do think the New England states and the northern states will miss out a little bit and not really see that much of a risk of severe weather, but basically for south of that, things will be pretty good. In terms of really long-term, prolonged storms, it doesn't really look like a good day for that tomorrow. You can see there's almost zero directional and vertical wind shear. You can see that wind speeds are relatively light throughout the entire atmospheric profile as we go all the way to the top of the sounding. And on top of that, wind speeds really just stay the same, basically from 1,000 all the way to 100 millibars. So not really much risk for any storms that develop rotation or have their updraft separated from the downdraft, allowing them to stay or to maintain strength for long periods of time. So most likely these will be more like pulse storms, but they will be very strong when they form. And with that, you could be seeing some pretty strong straight line winds and some pretty good downdrafts and even some small hail with many of these storms. Now, if we go to the NAM 500 millibar geopotential height, we can see that the reason for this persistent heat that we've been seeing over the past 2, 3, even 4 days has been that ridge off the coast right here, pumping in those warm temperatures from the south with those southwesterly winds, and that those sinking heights really making temperatures warm up quite steadily over the past couple of days. And you can see we do have this short wave right here, and that is allowing for a more organized convection and thunderstorms to develop today over the upper Midwest region down into the Texas Panhandle, like we saw in the GOES Satellite 16 view, with a lot of those organized convective storms being focused in these areas right here. Eventually, with time, we are going to see this high sort of kind of just slowly break down or slide to the east, but really not much there. So we will stay relatively and seasonally warm for the next week, and there really isn't much sign of of a significant cool down, but rather just a return to seasonally warm temperatures for the eastern part of the country. So as we go through time, we can see that high actually even strengthens for a little bit as we go through Wednesday, and then slowly starts to move east, and we have that little short wave just weaken under the presence of this high, really sort of minimizing it. And I think the concentration or the focus of the greatest heat will then move to the northeast as that high shifts just slightly to the east, focusing those warmer temperatures in the New England states. And then this is July 22nd, so the focus of the heat will be on the northeast for tomorrow, and then as we go further through time, we can see that by Thursday, that high does start to move off, and we can see this big ridge then takes the place of that high in the northern part of the country in southern Canada right here. All right, so with that big ridge in place, we're going to be seeing very warm temperatures for the northern part of the country, especially this area right here, with cooler conditions or relatively seasonal temperatures returning for Friday for large portions of the eastern United States. So after weeks, or not weeks, excuse me, after days of seeing temperatures run 10, 15 degrees above average, all the way down from Florida to the northeast, I think we will see a return to seasonally warm conditions with highs in the upper 80s for the south and mid to lower 80s in the northern portion of the region. And as we go even further through time, we can see that high does then eventually slowly drift just slightly to the east. So I do think that heat then those above average temperature anomalies will be focused mainly in the basic areas along and west of the Mississippi River, while seasonally average conditions will prevail for areas east. And storm chances really aren't looking too good as we go through Saturday. We can see that high really being dominant, pushing in those northerly winds just slightly, with no real chance of organized convection. You will be seeing pop-up storms just due to the heat and humidity, but not much chance of any significant organized convection over the next few days. The only real chance will be tomorrow and the day after that. Now, as we switch attention to the tropics, we can see that we do have Tropical Depression 7 forming down south right here. It is expected to be remain tropical, or strengthen actually into a tropical storm, and move slowly drift to the west. And right now it is this is the 5 p.m. advisory. Sustained winds at 35 miles per hour. Movement west-northwest to 8 miles per hour. So it's not quite drifting. It's moving quite steadily actually for a tropical storm. And it is expected to move slowly west into the southern Gulf, or maybe even approach the Gulf of Mexico after about a week or so. And if we go to the next image, we can see this is the forecast plot track. You can see the majority of the models have a good consensus on where this is going to go. They're all pretty much in this area right here. So confidence is high that this system will move slowly west, south of Cuba. And the question is, where will it go after that? This is more of a longer-term ensemble plot. You can see that those models really still maintain relatively consistent forecasts, with most of them taking them through this area right here. It remains to be seen whether this will happen, but with this model consistency, it does look likely that this area right here will need to pay careful attention to the weather forecast over the next few days, and really pay attention as to the movements of this system right here. And as for the strength, most of the models do think it will just maintain tropical storm strength. But keep in mind, this is only out for 128 or 168 hours. So this definitely could strengthen after that quite significantly, or it could just stay the same strength and even weaken. But all we need to know is right now we need to keep close eye on this as it gets closer and closer to the Gulf of Mexico and where it goes from there. One thing I would like to note is that the Atlantic is pretty warm right now. We have temperature anomalies running nice and warm, so conditions are favorable for this system to form and maintain its strength. At least it will have its fuel needed. Right now, I don't know whether there will be enough low amounts of wind shear to allow this storm to nicely develop, and I will be posting an update on this later in the next couple of days or so. So again, that's it for this video, guys. Remember, key points: the heat will only last for about the next 1 or 2 days in the east. That high pressure finally starts to shift to the east. So for Wednesday, the core of the heat will be in the northeastern part of the country. After Wednesday, that high does shift east, and we do see a big, strong high develop in the northern part of the country, which will make things return to seasonally average conditions in the eastern part of the country. And after that, we do see sort of a relatively quiet period with just a few pop-up storms here and there. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.